We got Mike Baker, former CIA covert operations officer, CEO of Portman Square Group Global Intelligence and Security Firm. He's now the host of the President's Daily Brief podcast. So much going on right now. Mike, let me just start with this. When you see that Kim Jong-un is planning to meet with Putin, and we know that China has been meeting with Putin, how concerned are you about, like, for lack of a better way of describing it, a new global axis of evil that is commingling itself, kind of associated with Ukraine and beyond, in opposition to the United States?
Yeah. Well, my first thought is Iran's probably like, hey, what's wrong with us? Hey, what
yeah, right.
What happened to us? We used to be in the axis of evil. We're still evil. So, yeah, it's disconcerting, but from the perspective that, look, North Korea, Kim Jong-un, his dad before him, and frankly, his dad before him, they were always seeking a way to be relevant, right? And when they felt disrespected or ignored on the world stage, then usually you'd get a missile being fired off. You'd get some action out of North Korea so that they could get some attention. This, in a sense, I think, is Putin, or more likely his Ministry of Defense, trying to butter up the North Koreans for a better deal on munitions and weaponry, which the Russians are in rather desperate straits in terms of stockpiling their inventories, because they've been depleting them at a fairly astonishing rate over the past 550 days or so. So it's worrisome. China is a different animal. China is sitting over. They only do things in their own best interests. So they're not best friends with anybody, right? This is not a BFF moment where, China is looking for, to hang out with them after school. This is just China doing what they always do, which is in the moment doing what they consider to be in their best interests.
Hey, Mike, it's Buck, and congrats on launching the new podcast, the PDB podcast for President's Daily Brief. And what do you think the future is going to look like of, let's put it this way, right? Because we don't know who's going to be the boss in 2024, the commander-in-chief. But between now and the election, the offensive that Ukraine was supposed to have broken through Russian lines with, it didn't work, right? I mean, we were told, oh, no, this time around. And I think people are starting to recognize that the bill to the taxpayer is getting bigger. The carnage over there, the casualties, just from a humanitarian side of things on both sides, combatants, non-combatants, everything is getting higher and higher each day. What do you think the policy is going to look like? And what should it be? Like, what should we do in Ukraine right now, or with regard to Ukraine, given what we've seen?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and it's depending on how it plays out with the election in 2024. I think you've got a couple of different scenarios, but just from an operational perspective, I think one thing that needs to be done is we need to, as the U.S. and with our allies, hopefully, we need to define what the end game looks like, right? Because we're in that point, we're getting close to winter fighting, and once that rolls around, it won't be long before we're at the start of the third year of this war. And typically that's going to signal a loss of interest, even amongst all those people who have planted flags out in their front yards and have stickers on their bumpers, or, yeah, we stand with Ukraine, even though in 2014 we didn't give a crap about what happened in Crimea or in the eastern Ukraine. But it's going to signal a change. And I think Zelensky realizes this. I think he and some of his cadre, I think they understand that one thing they've got to do is hold that alliance. If they lose that supply chain of resource, of munitions and weaponry, because allies start falling by the wayside, or because there's concerns over corruption, which we're starting to see, they've got a real problem, right? Without that supply chain, that steady flow of munitions and weaponry and resources, they can't maintain this, not only the counteroffensive, but any hope of a lasting success. So we've got to define an end game, and that typically means in a situation like this, there's going to have to be a negotiated settlement. And that really pisses off everybody, right? Because it's very emotive. And so nobody wants to give Putin anything. So we all imagine that somehow we're going to get to this place eventually where Ukraine reclaims all their territory, as they've said that is their end game, including Crimea. And then you have to ask yourself, is there any scenario where Putin's going to be willing to give up Crimea? I don't see that. So we're going to have to be a little more pragmatic about how this thing may turn out.
We're talking to Mike Baker. I appreciate him coming on with us. Encourage you to go check out his podcast, The President's Daily Brief, former CIA covert operations officer. You mentioned China. There's been a lot of discussion, certainly as the Republican primary continues, over what would happen if China invaded Taiwan. This has been a big topic in the wake of Ukraine's invasion by Russia. Do you think China will invade Taiwan? Do you think there is a time frame under which they are planning to do so?
Yeah, the last part of that question, yes. I think that time frame is somewhere within Xi Jinping's tenure. Right? I have a hard time imagining, and I think a lot of people that have been looking at this and profiling his character, his leadership, his personality, the idea that he'll walk off into the sunset at some point and hand over the reins and will not have acted on the Taiwan issue, I think those chances are somewhat remote. So I think your time frame has been condensed. Used to be we talk about maybe 2050 or sometime out there, but that has changed. Now I think in terms of an invasion, we have to understand that an invasion can look like a lot of different things. So this may not be ships heading across the strait, which is remarkably narrow, and militarily taking over the country. Right? There could be other elements to this, and whether that includes, the next battlefield, which is cybersecurity or cyber shenanigans, and space, right? The degrading of surveillance and intel capabilities, taking out satellite systems, whatever it may be. That will look different. And it also depends in part on the next upcoming election. The front runner right now is, he's speaking out more aggressively about the independence of Taiwan and the importance of maintaining that. So it is. I mean, look, we got a lot of flashpoints around the globe. Obviously, China, Taiwan is, in the top 3 at this stage.
Mike Baker, everybody, check out the PDB podcast, where he'll talk about national security every day from the perspective of a former CIA covert operations guy. Mike, great to have you on, my friend. Thanks for being here.
Hey, listen, thank you very much.